the betrayal, arrest, and trial of Jesus. And we're going to begin by reading through um, uh, chapter 18 in the Gospel of John. The book, the curriculum kind of writes this lecture as a 4-act play. I don't really teach it along those lines, but just so it makes sense to you as you're taking your notes. It's written as though it were a 4-act play. And the first 3 acts will be in this lecture. The fourth one will be in the next. So let's read John 18. When Jesus had spoken these words, so he was praying, remember, he went out with his disciples across the brook Kidron, where there was a garden which his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. This is the Garden of Gethsemane, of course. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said to him, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. So they fell over backwards. So he asked them again, "Whom do you seek?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you seek me, let these men go. Let my disciples go." This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken, "Of those whom you have given me, I have lost none." Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, "Put away your sword, put your sword in its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" So the band of soldiers and their captain and their officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. First they led him to Annas, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. It was Caiaphas who had advised the Jews that it would be expedient that one man should die for the people. Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. Since that disciple was known to the high priest John, he entered with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter stood outside at the door. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the servant girl who kept watch at the door and brought Peter in. The servant girl at the door said to Peter, "You also are not one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." Now the servants and the officers had made a charcoal fire. Remember that term. Just put that in the back of your brain there, a charcoal fire. Because it was cold and they were standing and warming themselves. Peter also was with them, standing and warming himself. The high priest then questioned Jesus. So now we're going into where the high priest is with Jesus. We'll go back out to the courtyard in a little bit. So the high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. Jesus answered him, "I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in the synagogues and in the temple where all Jews come together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said. To them, they know what I said." When he had said these things, one of the officers standing by struck Jesus with his hand, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" Jesus answered him, "If what I said was wrong, bear witness about the wrong. But if what I said is right, why do you strike me?" Annas then sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself, so they said to him, "You also are not one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the man whose Peter had cut off, whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Peter again denied it, and at once a rooster crowed. Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. That would be Pilate. It was early morning. They themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters, so they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. So Pilate went outside to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered him, "If this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you." Pilate said to them, take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." The Jews said to him, "If it was not lawful, it is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken to show by what kind of death he was going to die. So Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" Pilate answered him, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from this world." Then Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" After he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, "I find no guilt in him. But you have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" They cried out again, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber. So Jesus was either on his way to Gethsemane or possibly in the temple when he prayed his high priestly prayer. Wherever he was, he would have crossed the Kidron Valley and the brook Kidron, and gone on up to the Mount of Olives where the Garden of Gethsemane was. He knew it well. His disciples knew it well. They had often spent a night in the Garden of Gethsemane. Um, and there was this garden or orchard, maybe olive orchard, there called the Garden of Gethsemane, and that's where Jesus was arrested. This is what it looks like today. The Temple Mount is on that side, and the Mount of Olives is on this side. And it was likely, very likely after midnight, either very late at night or very, very early in the morning. And it was chilly outside, being probably March or April. And the disciples, obviously, by this time, are very sleepy, and they were assuming likely that they would just sleep there that night. Um, and Jesus then takes James and Peter and John deeper into the garden, and then he leaves them there and he goes to pray. His words aren't recorded in the Gospel of John, but they are elsewhere. And he was in anguish, in fact, so much anguish that Luke tells us that he sweat drops of blood. That's called hematidrosis. And it is a medical infirmity. Um, and it is in times of severe duress, severe stress, the capillaries of the forehead can burst, and you literally sweat drops of blood. And so Jesus was anguished. I don't think he was trying to get out of it. I think he knew when he said, "Father, if it be possible, take this cup from me." He knew it was impossible. But he was fully human as well as fully divine. And I can't imagine knowing, A, that you're going to die in the next 12 months or so. And even more, how you're going to die. A horrific death. The worst death ever devised. Um, I can't imagine the stress that that would put on anyone. So Judas was at this time probably already leading the band of men. It was a large contingent of men that came for Jesus. So I told you that this is, they kind of stage this as a 4-act play. So Act 1 is the betrayal and arrest of Jesus. Act 2 is the trial before Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin. Act 3 is Peter's denial, and all of that will be in this lecture. And then Act 4 will be the trial before Pilate. So Jesus and this is this is Act 1. This is what the garden actually looks like today, not what it would have looked like many years ago. It was an olive garden. Act 1 is the betrayal and arrest of Jesus. So, pretty much as soon as Jesus was done praying, a gang of people, a multitude of people came to arrest him. And he had escaped them any number of times. I'm sure they brought probably, the word for cohort is anywhere from 200 to 1,000 soldiers. So there were at least 200 plus being led by Judas, maybe more, that came for one man. And I'm sure they thought, this time he's not going to get away. But this time, he didn't need to get away. He didn't want to get away. He walked right into it. And he knew what was about to happen. And they came with swords and lanterns and torches, with Judas leading. And Judas, of course, betrays him with a kiss. He said to them, I'll let you know which one it is. It'll be the one that I kiss. And that was a common greeting, still is in Middle Eastern countries, that you kiss each other on either cheek as a greeting. And Jesus plaintively said, "You would betray me with a kiss." And so these soldiers came for Jesus, and it tells us that when he said, "Who do you seek?" They said, "Jesus of Nazareth," and he said, "I am he." Do you notice that? I am. And they all fell backward. It was so powerful that they couldn't stay on their feet. And Jesus eventually went with them without any sort of fight. And they take him to Annas' house. But before we get to that, I want to make sure that you know that Jesus protected his disciples. He said, "Look, you want me? Let these men go." And they did. They fled. They fled into the night. John and Peter followed Jesus at a distance to Annas' house. And so he made sure that they were not going to be punished along with him. And also, I want to mention Peter, who had a sword. I don't know if he was trying to kill someone and he was just a real bad swordsman, or if he was just a fisherman that didn't know what he was doing. Or maybe both. But he went to strike Malchus, a slave, and all he did was lop off his ear. And Jesus healed the man, of course, which probably saved Peter's life. He probably would have been executed for that. And obviously, it was a pitiful attempt to save Jesus. And Jesus didn't want to be didn't want to be saved by Peter. In fact, he said, "Put away your stuff, Peter. You're not helping." So they take him to Annas. Now, Annas was the former high priest. He was actually the father-in-law of Caiaphas. And Annas had been high priest about 20 years earlier, but he was beloved by the people. Caiaphas, not so much. And so Annas really held more sway. He had more power than Caiaphas did. But they first take Jesus, and again, it's very late at night, very early in the morning, to Caiaphas's house, or to Annas's house. And I think that's so they can wake up all of the Sanhedrin so that they can go ahead and get the trial done as quickly as possible. As we walk through this, I'm going to tell you the ways in which Jesus' trial was illegal. Nearly everything about Jesus' trial was illegal according to Jewish law and Roman law, and really most law anywhere. And so this was the group of politicians that are conducting a completely illegal trial against an innocent man. So he is at Annas's house, and John and Peter follow along where Jesus is going at a distance. And it was illegal to try anyone at night. You could not conduct a trial at night. It was against Jewish law. So the first illegality is that they are trying Jesus at night, and that's against the law. And so they have him in this room with members of the Sanhedrin. And first the high priest asks Jesus about his disciples and his doctrine. And he answers, I taught in plain sight. Ask anyone what I taught. I didn't hide anything. Ask anyone who listens to me. And I think there was a jailer next to him, I think because he was so surprised that someone dared talk back to the high priest that the jailer socked him in the face. Jesus didn't lose his temper, but this was the beginning of his physical abuse. Then the members of the Sanhedrin were having trouble finding a charge against Jesus. And so instead of finding a charge against Jesus, they brought in false witnesses. They brought in people to lie about Jesus. Also illegal. By Jewish law, by Roman law, by any legitimate court of law anywhere. You can't. What is the first thing in a courtroom in America? What is the first thing they say to a witness? Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God. I do, right? And they're lying. And they didn't say those exact things, but that was part of their law as well. The witnesses said that about Jesus that that Jesus said, "I will destroy this temple that was made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another without hands." So he was going to destroy the temple. Is that what Jesus meant? That he was going to destroy the literal temple? What did he mean, Jonathan? Yeah, he was talking about his own body, the temple of his body. But they didn't know that. They didn't understand that. And then, so they had false witnesses, and they paid them to lie about Jesus. Also guilty in the court of law. So far we have 3 illegalities in this trial of Jesus. And so the high priest realized that the accusation wouldn't get them anywhere, especially because they needed the allegation to get somewhere in a Roman court. And a Roman court would laugh and say, so he said he'd tear down the temple. We don't care about that. We don't care about the temple. And so they kept asking Jesus things, and he just stayed silent, fulfilling scripture, saying, as a lamb is sent to a shearer, so there was nothing found in his mouth. And so the high priest knew that this wasn't going to get them where they wanted to go. And he finally commanded Jesus to tell them plainly, are you the Messiah? Are you truly the Messiah? And he answered clearly and solemnly, yes, I am. And at that point, the whole assembly lost all composure. And they did what Middle Eastern men often did when they lost all composure. They began tearing their clothes and screaming and accusing him of blasphemy. Now, it's either true or it's blasphemy, what he said. Those are the only two choices. Either Jesus told the truth and saying, I am, or it is blasphemy. And they thought it was blasphemy and worthy of death. But they couldn't kill Jesus for blasphemy. They needed the Romans. So we're going to stop there for today, and you can spend the rest of the time you have working on your final, and then we'll pick this up tomorrow.